The morning sun cast long shadows across the tarmac at Heathrow Airport as Marcus Thompson adjusted his civilian clothes, feeling oddly out of place without his ceremonial uniform. For 15 years, he had stood guard at Buckingham Palace, his scarlet tunic and bearskin cap representing centuries of tradition and honor. Today, however, he was just another passenger, heading home to Manchester for his mother's 70th birthday celebration. Marcus had saved for months to afford the first-class ticket. It wasn't about luxury or status. It was about his injured knee, a consequence of standing motionless for countless hours in all weather conditions. The orthopedic surgeon had been clear. Long periods in cramped spaces could cause permanent damage to the already compromised joint. The extra legroom in first class wasn't a luxury. It was a medical necessity. As he approached the check-in counter, Marcus noticed the airline representative's eyes narrow slightly as she scanned his ticket. Sarah Mitchell, according to her name tag, had been working at the airport for 3 years, and she prided herself on her ability to spot potential problems before they escalated. Something about this passenger didn't sit right with her. "Good morning, sir," Sarah said, her voice professionally neutral. "May I see your identification, please?" Marcus handed over his passport and military identification card, a habit he'd developed over the years. Sarah's eyebrows rose slightly as she examined the documents. "You're traveling alone today, Mr. Thompson?" "Yes, I am," Marcus replied, shifting his weight slightly to ease the pressure on his knee. Sarah typed rapidly on her computer, her manicured nails clicking against the keys. She frowned at the screen, then looked back at Marcus with a scrutinizing gaze. His simple jeans and plain shirt didn't match her mental image of a first-class passenger. "I'm showing that this ticket was purchased just last week," she said, implying something without directly stating it. "That's correct," Marcus confirmed, unsure why the purchase date mattered. "And you paid in cash at one of our city offices?" "Yes, I did." Marcus had always preferred cash transactions, a habit from his military days when operational security was paramount. Sarah's suspicion deepened. Cash purchases for expensive tickets were often red flags in the airline industry. Combined with the passenger's modest appearance and recent purchase date, she was convinced something wasn't right. "Mr. Thompson, I'll need to verify some additional information. Please step aside while I process this." Marcus moved to the side, watching as other passengers were checked in without issue. 10 minutes passed, then 15. His knee began to throb, and he shifted uncomfortably, trying to find a position that didn't send shooting pains up his leg. Finally, Sarah returned, accompanied by a supervisor named Derek Chun. Derek's expression was apologetic but firm. "Mr. Thompson, we've reviewed your booking, and unfortunately, we're unable to honor this first-class ticket," Derek announced. Marcus felt his stomach drop. "I'm sorry, what? Why not?" "There are some inconsistencies with your purchase that need to be investigated. We can offer you a seat in economy class on this flight, where you can rebook for a later date once we've cleared up these issues." "What inconsistencies?" Marcus asked, struggling to keep his voice level. "I purchased this ticket legitimately. I have the receipt right here." Derek and Sarah exchanged glances. "Sir, we have policies in place to prevent ticket fraud. Your purchase pattern raised several red flags in our system." Marcus felt heat rising to his face. He had served his country, stood in the rain and snow protecting the royal family, and now he was being treated like a criminal because he didn't look wealthy enough for first class. "This is discrimination," Marcus said quietly but firmly. "You're judging me based on how I'm dressed." Sarah's expression hardened. "Sir, we're following standard security procedures. If you continue to cause a disruption, we'll have to call security." The word security stung more than Marcus cared to admit. He had been security for some of the most important people in the world, and now he was being threatened with it. "I need that first-class seat," Marcus explained, trying a different approach. "I have a medical condition. My knee. Do you have a doctor's note?" Derek interrupted. Marcus didn't. He hadn't thought he'd need one. The ticket was paid for. That should have been enough. "Listen," he said, pulling out his military ID again. "I'm a member of the Queen's Guard. I've served. Anyone can buy a military ID online," Sarah said dismissively. If you cannot provide proper documentation for your medical needs, then I'm afraid our decision stands. The surrounding passengers were beginning to stare. Some had their phones out, sensing drama unfolding. Marcus felt humiliation washing over him in waves. He had stood at attention while tourists took photos, maintained his composure when people tried to make him laugh, and never once had he felt as small as he did in this moment. "Fine," he said quietly. "I'll take the economy seat." Sarah smiled triumphantly as she printed out a new boarding pass. "That's row 43, middle seat. Boarding begins in 30 minutes. As Marcus limped away from the counter, he heard Sarah mutter to Derek, "These people always try to scam their way into first class." Good catch. The words cut deep. These people. After years of service, years of sacrifice, he was reduced to these people. The boarding process was torture. Marcus watched as the first-class passengers were called, seeing the empty seat that should have been his. When economy boarding finally began, he struggled down the narrow aisle, his knee protesting with every step. The middle seat in row 43 was a nightmare, cramped between a businessman who immediately claimed both armrests and a teenager wearing headphones at maximum volume. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Marcus tried to stretch his leg into the aisle, only to be told by a flight attendant that it was a safety hazard. He pulled it back, feeling the familiar shooting pain that meant he'd pay for this later. Halfway through the flight, the pain became unbearable. Marcus flagged down a flight attendant, a young man named James. "Excuse me," Marcus said, "is there any possibility of moving to an exit row? I have a knee injury, and I'm sorry, sir." James replied without really looking at him. "All exit rows are full. You should have requested special accommodations when booking." "I did," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "I bought a first-class ticket specifically for the legroom." James looked skeptical. "You bought a first-class ticket? Then why are you in economy?" The story tumbled out, the suspicious airline staff, the accusations, the humiliation. James listened with growing discomfort. That's terrible, sir. Let me see what I can do." James disappeared toward the front of the plane. Minutes later, he returned with the lead flight attendant, Patricia Williams, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes. "Mr. Thompson, James told me about your situation. Unfortunately, first class is completely full, but I can offer you a seat in premium economy. It's not much, but it has more legroom." Marcus accepted gratefully, though moving to the new seat was agony. Patricia helped him get settled, bringing him ice for his knee and checking on him periodically throughout the flight. It was the first kindness he'd experienced all day. "Were you really denied your first-class seat?" Patricia asked during one of her check-ins. Marcus showed her his original ticket receipt and military ID. Patricia's expression darkened. "This is completely unacceptable," she said. "Would you mind if I took photos of these documents? I'd like to file a report." Marcus nodded, too tired to care about proper channels anymore. He just wanted to get to Manchester, see his mother, and forget this whole ordeal. But Patricia Williams had other plans. During her break, she composed a detailed email to her friend Margaret Shun, who happened to be a senior vice president at the airline's corporate headquarters. The email outlined the situation, attached the photos, and ended with a simple question: "Is this really how we treat our veterans?" Margaret Chin read the email at 11 p.m. that night, after a long day of meetings. She immediately pulled up Marcus Thompson's booking record, and what she found made her stomach turn. Not only was his ticket legitimate, but a quick background check revealed his distinguished service record. 15 years in the Queen's Guard, numerous commendations, and a medical discharge due to injury sustained in the line of duty. She dug deeper. The customer service notes from Sarah Mitchell were damning, filled with assumptions and prejudices thinly veiled as security concerns. There was no actual evidence of fraud, just a series of subjective judgments about Marcus's appearance and payment method. Margaret picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found a number she was looking for. It was late, but this couldn't wait. The phone rang 3 times before a crisp voice answered. "Reynolds. Tom, it's Margaret Shun. I'm sorry to call so late, but we have a situation." Tom Reynolds, CEO of the airline, listened in growing horror as Margaret outlined the situation. When she finished, there was a long silence. "Send me everything," he finally said. "And I want Sarah Mitchell and Derek Chin in my office first thing Monday morning." "What about Mr. Thompson?" "I'll handle that personally." Marcus's mother's birthday party was bittersweet. He tried to hide his limp, but mothers always know. When she finally got the story out of him, her indignation was fierce. "You should sue them," she declared. "Taking advantage of you like that." "It's not worth it, Mum," Marcus said tiredly. "I just want to forget it happened." But forgetting became impossible the next morning when his phone rang at 8 a.m. The number was unfamiliar, and Marcus almost didn't answer. "Mr. Thompson? This is Tom Reynolds, CEO of British Airways. I'm calling to personally apologize for the appalling treatment you received yesterday." Marcus sat up straighter, wincing as his knee protested. "Mr. Reynolds? I've reviewed the entire incident, Mr. Thompson, and I'm deeply ashamed of how our staff behaved. There is no excuse for the discrimination you faced, and I want to make this right. I appreciate the apology, sir, but please let me finish. First, we're refunding your entire ticket cost, both the original first-class fare and the economy seat you were forced to take. Second, we're providing you with a year of complimentary first-class travel on any of our routes. Third, and most importantly, we'd like to offer you a consultancy position with our customer service training department." Marcus was speechless. "A consultancy position? Your experience, both in service to our country and, unfortunately, with our failure yesterday, makes you uniquely qualified to help us train our staff in respect, dignity, and looking beyond surface appearances. The position will be part-time, allowing you to work around your medical needs, and would include full benefits." I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Tom Reynolds urged. "Help us make sure this never happens to anyone else." Marcus thought about all the times he'd stood guard, protecting others while his knees slowly deteriorated. He thought about Sarah Mitchell's dismissive attitude and the assumptions she'd made. He thought about all the other veterans who might face similar treatment. "Yes," he said finally, "I'll do it." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The story of Marcus's treatment went viral after another passenger's video surfaced, showing the confrontation at the check-in counter. The airline faced massive public backlash, with hashtags like #RespectOurGuards and #FirstClassDiscrimination trending globally. Sarah Mitchell and Derek Chin were both terminated after investigations revealed patterns of similar discrimination in their past behavior. But Marcus took no joy in their dismissal. Instead, he focused on his new role, developing training programs that emphasized empathy, respect, and the danger of assumptions. His first training session was with a group of new customer service representatives. Marcus stood before them, his knees supported by a custom brace the airline's medical insurance had provided. "I want you to look at this photo," he said, projecting an image of himself in his Queen's Guard uniform. The trainees murmured appreciatively at the impressive sight. "Now look at this one," he continued, showing a photo from the day at the airport. Tired, plainly dressed, obviously in pain. Same person, same honor, same service record. The only difference is perception. Your job is to see past the surface, to treat every passenger with the dignity they deserve, regardless of how they're dressed or how they pay for their ticket. One trainee raised her hand. "But what about security concerns? Surely some suspicions are justified." Marcus nodded. "Absolutely. Security is paramount. But there's a difference between following security protocols and making judgments based on appearance. Let me show you what real security assessment looks like." He spent the next hour teaching them observation techniques he'd learned in the military, how to spot actual behavioral indicators of concern versus superficial judgments. The trainees were riveted. After the session, Margaret Chun approached him. "That was brilliant, Marcus. You're a natural teacher." "Thank you," Marcus replied, "though I never expected to be standing on this side of things." "Life has a funny way of putting us where we need to be," Margaret said. "Your experience, as painful as it was, is going to help thousands of passengers receive the treatment they deserve." As Marcus packed up his materials, his phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Saw your interview on the morning news. So proud of you, love. Dad would be too." He smiled, thinking of his late father, also a veteran, who had faced his own share of discrimination after returning from service. Maybe this was his way of honoring that legacy, turning a moment of humiliation into lasting change. 6 months later, Marcus was invited to speak at the airline's annual leadership conference. As he prepared his remarks backstage, Patricia Williams, the flight attendant who had shown him kindness, found him. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "Your training programs have transformed how we operate. Just last week, I saw a junior staff member go out of their way to help a passenger others might have overlooked. That's your influence." "It's not just me," Marcus said modestly. "It takes a company willing to admit its mistakes and commit to change." "True," Patricia agreed. "But it also takes someone brave enough to stand up and say this isn't right when it would be easier to stay silent." As Marcus took the stage to thunderous applause, he thought about that horrible day at the airport. If someone had told him then that it would lead to this, to meaningful change, to a new career, to the ability to help others, he wouldn't have believed them. "Good morning," he began, his voice strong and clear. "I want to tell you about a phone call that changed my life, but first, I need to tell you about the day that led to it. A day when I learned that sometimes our greatest challenges become our most important opportunities." The audience leaned in, ready to hear the story of how one man's dignity, tested but never broken, became the catalyst for an entire organization's transformation. As Marcus spoke, he stood tall and proud, no longer defined by his uniform or his injury, but by his character and his commitment to ensuring that respect and dignity were never luxuries available only to those who looked the part. The wheel of his life had turned in ways he never expected. From guarding royalty to being dismissed as a fraud, from humiliation to vindication, from victim to advocate. Marcus Thompson's journey proved that sometimes the most powerful changes begin with the simplest acts of standing up for what's right. His mother had been wrong about one thing, though. He didn't need to sue anyone. The real victory wasn't in punishment or revenge. It was in the knowing look of understanding that passed between him and every trainee who left his sessions with a new perspective. It was in the emails from passengers who experienced better treatment because of the changes implemented. It was in the knowledge that his pain had become purpose. As the conference session ended and Marcus fielded questions from the audience, his phone buzzed with a message. It was from an unknown number, but the content made him smile. "Mr. Thompson, I was the teenager sitting next to you on that flight with my headphones. I just saw your story online. I'm sorry I was so oblivious to your pain that day. I'm starting university next month to study aviation management, and I promise to remember your story. Thank you for turning something awful into something meaningful." "Jamie," Marcus typed back quickly. "No apologies necessary, Jamie. We all have our journeys. Make yours count." And that, he reflected as he prepared for the next question, was really what it was all about. Not the first-class seat he'd been denied, but the first-class example he could set for others. The phone call from Tom Reynolds had changed his life, yes, but more importantly, it had given him the platform to change others' lives too. The guard who had once stood silent and still had found his voice, and he was determined to use it to ensure that dignity, respect, and fairness weren't privileges reserved for a few, but rights extended to all. In the end, that was worth more than any first-class ticket could ever be. As Marcus left the conference center that evening, he walked without limping for the first time in months. The new treatment plan, the proper support, and, most of all, the sense of purpose had done more for his recovery than any amount of legroom could have provided. He had been denied first class that day at the airport, but life, in its mysterious wisdom, had upgraded him to something far more valuable, a chance to make a difference. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, reminding Marcus of his ceremonial uniform. He had traded one form of service for another, and, while he might no longer guard palace gates, he now stood watch over something equally important: the principle that every person, regardless of appearance or circumstance, deserved to be treated with dignity and respect. His phone rang as he reached his car. It was his mother. "How did it go, love?" she asked. "Better than I could have imagined," Marcus replied. "Mom, do you remember what Dad used to say about service? That it never really ends, just changes form?" "Exactly." Marcus smiled. He was right, as usual. He'll be so proud of you, Marcus. We all are. As he drove home, Marcus thought about the journey from that humiliating morning at Heathrow to this moment of triumph and purpose. One phone call had indeed changed everything, but it was what he had chosen to do with that change that truly mattered. He had taken injustice and transformed it into inspiration, discrimination into education, and pain into purpose. The boy who had dreamed of serving his country had become a man who served humanity in an unexpected way. And while he might never again wear the scarlet tunic and bearskin cap, Marcus Thompson had found a new uniform, one woven from compassion, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to ensuring that what happened to him would help create a world where such treatment became not just unacceptable, but unthinkable. As he pulled into his driveway, Marcus made a mental note to call Tom Reynolds in the morning. He had an idea for a new training module, one focused on recognizing and honoring different forms of service. After all, heroes came in many uniforms, and sometimes they wore no uniform at all. The porch light was on, welcoming him home. As he walked to his door, Marcus realized that while his journey had begun with being denied a seat, it had led him to find his place. And that place was wherever he could stand up for others, ensuring that dignity and respect were never luxuries, but fundamental rights available to all. The guard had become a guardian in a different sense, and the phone call that had changed everything was just the beginning of a story that would ripple outward, touching lives in ways that neither Tom Reynolds nor Marcus Thompson could have imagined on that transformative day. In the end, Marcus reflected as he settled in for the evening, the greatest first-class upgrade wasn't to a better seat. It was to a better world, one training session, one changed mind, and one act of standing up at a time. And that was a journey worth taking, no matter where you were seated.